In a world where education is key, finding the right math program for your kids is crucial. And that's where CTC Math steps in. This isn't just another math program, it's a comprehensive math curriculum covering everything from K to 12. What sets it apart? The video tutorials. They're not just educational, they're engaging, breaking down complex topics into bite-sized, understandable pieces. It's like having a math expert in your home, available anytime. And it's not about memorizing facts. It's about truly understanding math concepts. The kind of understanding that sticks with them, not just until the next test, but for life. Plus, the flexibility is unbeatable. Whether you're homeschooling or supplementing after-school learning, CTC Math fits into your schedule, not the other way around. Why not take the leap? Visit ctcmath.com today and start your free trial. Discover how a comprehensive curriculum can challenge your child's perspective on math. It's time to give them the tools they need to succeed. That's ctcmath.com.
The Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network thanks all of our sponsors who keep us on the air and able to provide amazing podcasts free of charge. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Making Biblical Family Life Practical. I'm Hal.
And I'm Melanie.
You know, the question we had was, what about children who are picky? Or rather, what can you do to prevent your kids from being picky eaters?
Yeah, that's something we were really concerned about when we started having kids, because we both grew up in families with really picky eaters.
Yeah, present. I mean, that's me.
And we just didn't want our kids to be that way because it's hard. Life is hard as a picky eater. For example, I really was not a picky eater, but the few things I didn't like I didn't like peanut butter. Do you know how hard life is for a kid who doesn't like peanut butter?
Probably like a kid in the South who doesn't like watermelon.
It's really tough because you get left out of things because people just assume. I remember going on a school field trip. Yeah. And they said they would provide bag lunches, and I get there and it was peanut butter and jelly. And I thought, no lunch for me. No lunch for Melanie. Yeah. Okay. You know, if you want to start biblical, you know, if you allow somebody to have a really picky attitude about food, then they're not grateful for God's provision, and they're not gracious guests when people provide for them. And, you know, there's a lot of limitations in there that are built into that. So, you know, as the one who was more the picky eater myself, when our kids were little, I thought, I want my children to be better about this than I am. You know, I can't tell you how much I respect that because I was really concerned. And you decided that you were not going to complain about food. Right. And that you would eat whatever was on the plate. And if you couldn't eat it, you at least moved it around so it looked like you ate it. And you never complained. And so our kids didn't even figure out there were a lot of foods you didn't like until they were teens, probably.
And they were so delighted. They thought that's so fun, you know, to realize that Dad has been the picky eater all this time, and
nobody knew.
Nobody knew, yeah. Well,
but you know, that took a lot of self-control on your part.
Well, I was just trying to be intentional about it.
But I think it made a huge difference in our kids' attitude toward food.
Well, you know, kids look to their parents to understand the world that is opening up around them. And I got a really good illustration of that one time, because I remember when we were young parents and we had like 2 or 3, I guess this was third. Yeah, this was our third child, and he was just, you know, getting out of his toddler years. And we were buying some groceries. Occasionally we get these flats of miscellaneous canned goods at the discount end of the grocery store. And I was putting these away in the pantry one day, and there was a can of black olives in there. And I don't really care for olives. But my son, who will remain nameless right now, comes wandering and says, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, those are black olives. Would you like to try one?" And he's, you know, "Oh, okay." And so I fed this little 3 or 4 year old guy, you know, a whole black olive out of the jar, and he loved it. He thought it was the best thing ever. And to this day, he loves olives. And he's raising a bunch of olive-eating children of his own now. That they hide the olives from one another. And it's really funny. But it was just...
To the point that a couple of Christmases ago, one of the now dad's siblings, one of our kids, gave my grandson a can of olives for Christmas and gave him 2 cans, one for dad, one to share, and one for you.
That's right. So, it's one of those kind of things where it's like when that little toddler falls down and they look up to see, should I be alarmed about this? And, if you can tell they're not injured and you just basically play it off, then that little child will say, oh, and they'll get up and go about their business, and if they're really hurt, then you fuss over them. But it's the same way with the food. You give them something new and they look at it and they say, what is this? And they look at mom and they look at dad and say, do they seem to like this? If dad's got his lip curled saying, I don't like this,
then they're not touching it.
And so, yeah. So that's one of the important things, I think, is be the example.
Yeah. Your attitude toward food is going to make a big difference toward your kids. And even if you struggle with food, having a good attitude about it and not making a big deal about that in front of your kids can make a big difference.
I'm reminded, I was going to bring history in. I'm reminded of a story that was in Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. He said he was one of a great big family. They had 8 or 10 kids or something that he was growing up with. And they were really pretty poor. And his parents had a rule that you were not allowed to comment about the food. Not, I love this or I don't like this. You were just thankful for whatever this was. And so, he grew up with this idea that, hey, whatever comes on your plate, you're thankful for that, and you don't make judgments about it one way or the other. And, I think the cook needs to be praised if it's something really good, but I see there's some wisdom in there.
Well, one of the things we did not want dinner time struggles to be a big part of our family life. We wanted the family table to be a place where everybody was happy and it was joyful and people looked forward to eating together. And so we didn't want to have a bunch of struggles and ugliness and you have to do this and you have to do that. And so that started really early, even back in babyhood, where, we didn't give our kids baby foods. We fed them from the table things that they were able to eat. Yeah. And so they grew up not having some bland mush, but having whatever we were eating. So the flavors and textures of our family table were comfortable to them. That's all they'd ever had.
I remember when our oldest was about 7, and I was on a business trip, and the whole family had come along, as we tended to do, and we went to an Indian restaurant, and we had tandoori chicken and naan bread and all the, the great Indian stuff, and the boys were just gobbling it up because, they've grown up eating a variety of spices and cuisines and stuff. It's because we have kind of eclectic recipes in our home. And the restaurateurs were so delighted to see these young American kids just loving the Indian food. They gave them free dessert.
Yeah, bringing them food to try.
It was just awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, back to complaining.
Okay.
One of the things we have not tolerated at our table is complaining. And so our rule was that if you complained about the food, now, if you didn't eat it, that's okay. But if you complained about it, then you had to stand up behind your chair and watch everybody eat for a little while.
That was a rule for any sort of misdemeanor
that was
table.
Pretty tough. That was pretty tough for little boys because they're hungry. Yeah. And standing there for just a few minutes watching everybody eat really made them not want to complain again.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the rules that we had. I do want to say up front, though, that if you're dealing with a child that's having sensory issues, you need to be cautious. You need to be merciful.
Okay.
Because we did require our kids to have the number of bites that they were years old.
Okay.
So that we could be sure they actually tried things. But if I had a child who was really struggling, who was having nausea or gagging when they tried something, I would back off because having a child who's not a picky eater is not more important than your relationship with your child.
Yeah, there's an element of mercy in there. Well, and then that's an escape clause that we wrote into our family rules, so to speak. We said, okay, everybody is allowed to have one thing that they really don't like.
And I'll accommodate that.
And so we had one who just could not stand mayonnaise. Couldn't take mayonnaise at all, the texture, the whatever. And another one didn't like peanut butter or whatever. They said there was one. Okay, we'll allow you one thing that you're allowed to say, I really don't like that.
Yeah.
But that's it, And that was a good rule because they realized, okay, there is some room for me to have tastes and preferences, just not about everything.
So what do you do about the kid who's just determined not to try it? It looks yucky. We had one of those. It was fried okra. Now, y'all, we're from the South. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I don't blame them. But in the South, in the South,
okay,
we eat a lot of okra, and our family loves fried okra.
Yes.
And
I just turn it off so it's quiet.
Turn off your...
There.
Okay.
That's all.
In the South, we love fried okra. Yeah. Our family loves fried okra. I did not want this child to miss out on that delight. Right. And so what I did is I planned one night that I would make dinner late. Mm-hmm. And I would make the fried okra before I made the rest of dinner. Okay? Yeah. And so I fried this okra. I put it on a platter on the table. And I said, oh, so sorry, dinner's late, kids. But you can snack on the okra till dinner's ready. Mm-hmm. And this little one comes by and is like, okra. I said, that's okay. You don't have to eat it. And pretty soon, about 5 minutes later, I see this little one sneak in and get one piece.
I'm starving. I'll eat anything.
I'll eat anything. A few minutes later, a couple more pieces. Well, let's just say she loves fried okra today. Because hunger is the best sauce.
There was a story in our family, one of our family members, their parents had grown up during the Depression, and they were in a large family and not living on a lot of income when she was young. And she said that her mom always, whenever they had anything with cabbage, she would make a big deal out about the core of the cabbage, the big hard crunchy bit in the middle, and like that was the best thing ever. And all those kids grew up thinking, boy, that big crunchy stalk in the middle of the cabbage.
The part we usually throw away.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I just love that. I'm thinking, wow. That was one I would be picky about. Yeah. But
And so how do you raise kids who aren't picky eaters? I think your attitude is going to be the biggest issue.
That's really the truth.
Because if you're complaining and whining and picky, you can expect your kids to do the same. They want to be like you. And don't allow complaining. It was always okay for our kids to move their food around. I'm not going to get mad at you if you don't eat your food. You're not going to see it again in another meal. I figure if you don't eat lunch today, well, you're going to be really hungry by the time dinner comes around. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't force kids to eat ever. That's not a good thing. That's not a healthy thing. Mm-hmm. But they weren't allowed to complain about it either because that's ungracious. Mm-hmm. And little did we know that the Lord had prepared for us the crazy life that we live, where we stay in people's homes all over the world. Literally, and eat whatever they put in front of us. Yes. And sometimes you have to just master yourself and eat whatever you've got. Like, I will never forget seeing you eat a big hunk of broccoli at a important meal in Tokyo.
Not one of my favorite vegetables, I'll admit.
Osaka. I guess it was Osaka. But yeah,
Yeah, but in the situation where they're in a ministry, we're there for the process of ministering to people. Yeah. We're there as a testimony, and you think, food is not going to be an issue. Yeah. We're not going to make. We had a friend who was a former missionary to Papua New Guinea, and he said one of the biggest things that he ever did was he learned to eat raw yams out of the field, just like the tribe there that he was ministering to.
Now, y'all, that's not like a southern yam. It's not sweet. He says it tastes like an aspirin.
He said it was like chewing up Tylenol. But honestly, he said whenever they introduced him to their friends from other tribes, they would say, "Oh, this is Ron, and he eats yams with us." Which apparently a lot of the Westerners who had come through there just said, "Oh man, I can't eat that. How do you eat this stuff?" But he had made it. He said he had to kind of draw the line at grubs, but he ate the yams with them, and that was part of his testimony. And so, and that's one of those things. You want your children to be prepared for wherever God's going to call them. And sometimes food and hospitality is going to be a critical part of that.
And learning to eat what's put before you without complaining can be really important. I remember one trip that we took, we stayed like at 5 different people's houses over 5 days of traveling, and every single family served us chili. Everyone.
Yeah,
every one of them.
It was remarkable. By the end of the trip, they bring out a pot of chili, and the kids would kind of glance at us. We'd say, yeah. But nobody complained.
Nobody complained.
And we had some nice variations on it.
We
it wasn't
really
all the
did.
same.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
But I think giving mercy to those who struggle for good reasons, sensory issues or whatever.
Right.
Absent that stuff, I think it's really worthwhile to teach your kids not to be picky. I think it pays off.
It really does. And you're right. I mean, you need to be sensitive to your kids. When are they just being childish and they need to grow up a little bit? And when is it that maybe not just a sensory issue, maybe they have a sensitivity to something. Yeah. Maybe they feel a reaction to one of the seasonings or one of the components. I mean, you need to be aware of what's going on with your kids and not just focused on your goal here. But all in all, I'm very thankful that our kids have not been picky. They've not grown up that way, and they're seeing the benefit of it now as adults, most of them. So, yeah.
And so are their kids.
Yeah, right. Very good. Well, look, we appreciate you joining us. I mean, we are all on this journey of raising children, hopefully for the glory of God, and there's an awful lot that goes into that. Sometimes things that you never thought of before. So, that's our take on raising kids who are not picky eaters.
For more on parenting, especially boys, check out Raising Real Men. Surviving, Teaching, and Appreciating Boys. And I think you'll love it. You can find it at our website or anywhere you buy books.
All right.
Find us at raisingrealmen.com and anywhere on social media at Raising Real Men or at Hal and Melanie.
Great. So, until next time, I'm Hal.
And I'm Melanie.
Thanks for joining us.